Good morning, Turquoise Leadership. Welcome back to Altruistic Channel. Today's post is going to be directly speaking to what the new setting is revealing about what's happening around us. And as many of you know, I have two channels. I have Altruistic Channel, and then I have Altruistic Channels Arevalo. And on Altruistic Channels Arevalo, it's my personal blog type of thing, where I speak more to the spiritual aspects of banter between people who are on the ascension path or part of the collective and believe in something of a divine universe. And so I say some very candid things over there that I won't necessarily put here on Altruistic Channels, because I've mentioned before, Altruistic Channels is dedicated towards more of the divine universe and the turquoise leadership. But just so you guys know, the greatest thing that we can do right now as a leadership is to realize that a lot of what I've been stating in either channel has come to pass, and it's not something that is something to boast about. It's just something to better align our leadership now with the fact that some of us do understand things that maybe are not as readily available to others, but to understand that we need to come together now and start looking at the truth of things. So I had done a bunch of videos, but I'm just going to quote a couple of them just so you guys have a reference point for those of you who are going to need a little bit more information on me. And it started with on Altruistic Channels Arevalo. I specifically had posted a video a month ago that said, do you know how to answer Gabriel's incoming questions? And then followed 2 weeks ago, I also chose how you choose to experience what's to come is entirely up to you. And then last but not least, sometimes the truth of what's to come is not easy to hear. And in all three of them, I had made mention of the fact that once Easter Sunday arrived, we would be at a point in our collective experience where we would be entering the 7-year trials and tribulations that they spoke about. And so instead of just focusing on the fact that I was right in that, I had mentioned at the end of one of them very clearly, I said, I think it was the last video I posted over there on Altruistic Channels Arevalo, I had mentioned that it starts with an earthquake. And I had mentioned that it would be Easter Sunday where everything would begin. And sure enough, last night in California at 4:44 a.m., or I think it was like 4:40 in the morning, an earthquake hit, and it was confirmed. And so instead of focusing on the fact that I was right in that way, because it's very egotistical, why not focus on what this means now for the next 7 years at this level? And so for those of you who are incredibly gifted in ways that are maybe a little foreign to other people, or incredibly intelligent people, because you're gifted equally, just different sides of it, right? Who are starting to see that we need to start being better prepared for what's unfolding. We can tell that something's up. Not only do we have the whole P word going on, and we have all of this weird government shadow stuff going on, and we know things are happening behind the scenes, and a lot of people are left, scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on. We at the Turquoise Leadership have the opportunity to drop all that bullshit and say to each other, okay, it's go time. We know that something's up. How do we better prepare those that are going to go through? How do we better prepare our world in a transparent way so that it's not done in secrecy? Because the thing that we're finding at this level in particular is that a lot of people are being turned away from the truth because they know that it's built on lies. Now, for us here, we can completely understand that what the governments are trying to do is to protect the people and keep order. And we get that. So we're not throwing stones in that direction. We know that they're up against the wall here. But what we, as the turquoise leadership, the true leadership that's going to arise from this, what we have the opportunity to do is to speak in a transparent way that understands the backstory, understands what can be said to the public, and how do we integrate them in a way that brings all people into it. If we include every voice, if we find a way to do the delegation that I was speaking to and start pooling our energies towards one another and our resources towards one another, then what happens is we get better understanding as to what people truly can hear and retain, or what they can't hear and will just dismiss. And so we have a better operation system from which to build a sturdy foundation for what will happen now. 7 years is a long period. To a lot of people. For a lot of us, 7 years isn't that long, but we're at a different point in our life. We have accomplished mastery in some level, and so we are now bringing our talents to the table and saying, okay, this is how I found my spiritual path, but here's how I got through the physical world. Here's why I didn't give up. Here's why I did this. Here's why I did that. And that consensus that we'd be building, which is go time now, honestly, guys, like, come on. Like, not only was I to the day, but it was to the day, to the almost the hour that I said it would happen. And I was warned about the volcano, and again, Iceland is having the volcano. These are not things that are all far out there. These are things that are handed to us by a higher system, by a source, by the divine will, by whatever you want to call it, God, Allah, and whatnot. And so instead of focusing on all of the negativity, what I'm trying to say is we need to rally around the fact that we now have an opportunity to settle into what do we do during the 7 years. There are many of us in this vibrational output that goes with altruistic channels right now that are all being brought together because we as a peer group will be able to literally plan out exactly how this is going to go. And that's the keys that each of us hold, right? And so we have the keys to understanding the full trajectory of what this is. As a strategist, I can see the long-term effects of what's to come. So we have the opportunity now that it's go time to literally start building the foundation. Okay, so we know that they're going to have a lot of turmoil and they're going to freak out, and they won't necessarily understand that this has been a build up, that the last year and a half has been a ability for them to come into alignment with something higher than themselves and find a peace and to work through their fears. Okay, but what about those who didn't work through their fears? How did we get over our fear, and how do we better help people when they're ready to ask for that during the 7-year period? And then for those who did overcome it, what was the exact process? And share those stories. And so we start to build a stable system from which to build the new earth that will be emerging afterwards, right? So instead of having to just worry about life or death situations, which is what the governments are working on, or instead of just worrying about what the religions have to deal with, which is just spiritual endeavors, we're finding the bridge between the two, and we're finding a way to actually prepare for all of the anomalies. When you're stuck in a situation where you are in a fear setting, where you have to deal with just fear, or where you have to deal with life or death situations, you don't have the liberty to literally explore what all of the different avenues can be. The turquoise leadership that I'm speaking to right now, you all, we do have that ability because all of us have experience that are being brought together for a reason. So understanding what that is will beget the future for us, and we will be able to explore the hypothesis in a much clearer fashion without bias, because we're not looking for a reason why it won't work. We're looking for why that might help. And so we'd be building that foundation very quickly. So let's look at something like, okay, so the spiritual houses are now going to have to deal with the fact that a lot of secrets are going to be coming out that were actually done to protect the people. But if they come out because of the changes that are happening, how do we then better prepare the people so that they don't lose all of their hope and faith? Because if that happens, all bets are off. And so we have two settings that are now kind of collapsing around us. That's what I've been warning about in a very polite way, but that's what's happening. And so though the shadow of the government is having to deal with the life or death situation, trying to keep people from panicking, because panic would never help anybody, we in the turquoise leadership can look at it and go, okay, now that makes sense. We now understand why they're being quiet and why they're doing some of these manipulative things, because they're trying to protect the people. So instead of gunning after them, we now have to step into this position of, okay, how do we mediate between them in a way that we're not overstepping our bounds. We're just we're planning. We're the strategists, okay? And then when we're looking at the religious houses, now we understand why they've been more quiet and off the radar. It isn't because they're afraid of the boss. It's because they know things that are going on that we don't know. Okay, so how do we then meet the needs of the people so that we can actually, when everything is revealed, because you can't hide this forever, is my point. Like, I was right to the earthquake, I was right to the volcano, I was right to all of it. So the fact that I'm aware of it means that a lot of people on our planet are equally aware that these things are coming. So how do we mitigate the panic that will come through that? And then more importantly, how do we serve the needs of the people who are willing to start working on this now? And how do we look at things like, okay, if there's a huge earthquake in California, how many people do we expecting to go through? And then that'll be up to the individual and their intuition. But okay, so of the people that go through, what are their needs? They're going to need a place to go. They're going to need some sort of shelter. They're going to need some sort of food system. What is the system that we have in place for emergency food stamps? What's the system that's going on with the global concern with other places, volcanic eruption? What do we do on a state or city level that mitigates and helps the people find a better sense of security, right? Because when all hell breaks loose, which 7 years of tribulation kind of says that, we know that they're going to need a lot of emergency supplies. So where are those locations, and how do we better operate them? Do we want people who are in fear to be working there, or do we want people who have risen in our ascendance, like us, the turquoise leadership, to step in and go, no, okay, we're going to work with all of you, and we're going to just, we're not telling you what to do, but here's what we suggest. And then for world leadership, if you want to leave a legacy, this is it. You got 7 years to build it. This is the time to build. Because what we're doing now is we're going to be working not with the people who aren't going to make it, the people who don't want to see this, that are going to live in denial and are going to wait till the last minute. We can't, there's emergency management. You can't save those people. You know what I mean? And like I said, people will have to save themselves. And so I know it sounds a little bit harsh, but as a turquoise leadership, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. And so how do we better prepare ourselves for what this is going to look like, and so that we are in center point and clear-headed to be able to guide those around us in a way that's not dictatorish, but more like camaraderie-ish, right? Like you're just being brotherhood and sisterhood. You're trying to help each other out for those who want to seek a better way, right? Because it's inevitable. It's already happening. So, okay, so we have that. So now we understand the first part, which is the foundational effort. Now we're building the walls. And okay, how do we put the ceiling on top? Who's going to be doing this? Who's going to be doing that? What is the economic input? Do we have any millionaires and billionaires that understand what this is all about and are willing to invest in the people? Are they willing to leave a legacy beyond just the materialistic, self-centered life? Or are they willing now to step up and help? Are there any corporations out there that are willing to prepare for what's to come and are willing to build tent cities and willing to do whatever it takes in regions that are not near volcanoes, are not near earthquakes, are not in hurricane country? Those are prime property. How do we start operating in those areas? Are we going to have to possibly look at moving people towards Canada? Are we going to have to, try to make better deals with Mexico, which would be completely ironic? And it reminds me of a movie that I once saw, but it's totally possible. It's Carmageddon. And so how do we, instead of worrying about the way that people interpret what we're working on, why don't we just be proactive and include them into the conversation so that they understand that these are just variables that we, the people who are willing to step up in ascension and willing to help the collective, are exploring in order to be truly better prepared, where we're not having to have to hide in the shadows, or we're not having to have to hide secrets. That's not our thing. And so how do we get people on board to do that? And so we begin with the delegation. We build with the vetting that I have in my hand. I have how that goes. And how do we bring the interests of the people who are involved? I know for a firm fact that there are people that are supposed to be already in working together. Egos involved in all that stuff. Well, guess what? I was absolutely correct to the day of when the earthquake happened, and I said that it would be Easter Sunday, and I said it would be the resurrection point, and that it would start with an earthquake. And sure enough, it went exactly as that. I mentioned the thing about Indonesia, and then of course Indonesia has a volcano, and then I mentioned that there was something about a volcano now, and of course Iceland is erupting. These are not things that I magically pulled out of my asshole. These are things that I've been handed by a higher intellect. So instead of worrying about where that came from, why don't we worry about the fact that if we have this information, then the least we can do for each other is to talk to each other and say, hey, okay, so now that we know this is coming, how do we better prepare to have our security set and like minds working on this so that we can help those who do make it through? Remember, we have no control over who the divine chooses to walk through the fires. It is up to the individual person. And whether you believe in spirituality or not, at the end of the day, this is going to be intuitive. This is going to be one of those things where if you do not look at life and if you do not look at what's coming and you're not paying attention to the signs, that you're not going to probably make it. Why? Because you've been ignoring your higher self. That's between you and the higher self. That's not between us. But for those of us who are going to make it, we don't know who are the next wavers who are going to wake up in time to go, oh shit, we got to go. And so how do we deal with making sure that we have transport for them? Where do we have drop-off points, pick-off points? What are these emergency situations that are transparent? And if we include the people in the conversation, then guess what? More people are going to make it. Instead of creating fear about it, do what I'm doing, which is just speak very candidly to the turquoise leadership and say, it's go time. How much longer are we going to wait before we start working on what is inevitable? We see it happening all around us. None of this was making sense. Now it's starting to make sense to us. Okay, so how do we leave the legacy that we're meant to leave? How do we leave the legacy of leadership that truly was for the people? How do we get as many people to a safe point and then help them expand their horizons? How do we do that? Because the academy is changing. Whatever you consider Earth, whatever you consider life, you can tell that things are on a completely different path than what we thought. Instead of worrying about the lies, manipulation, and all of the dark stuff, remember that those are things that are going to trap a lot of people. Let them eat the fucking cake. If they want to eat cake, let them eat the cake. We're worried about those who are going to wake up and say, okay, something's going on. How do we get information that's transparent? Because we understand the value of the live or die situation. That's a very carnal thing that you must deal with. The governments are on top of that. And then we have the whole religious aspect of it. They're on top of that. So how do we, as spiritually centered people who are about the collective race of man, help the collective without taking away their freedom? Because again, we know that we got here because of higher intuition. Something, source, Allah, God, Buddha, whoever you believe in, has led you to a point where you are now listening to your inner monologue, and you're no longer worried about what other people are doing. You're worried about people who are like you, who are realizing we need to start working on this if we want to truly thrive through the chaos. Order cannot come without chaos. And so keeping a level head and being very honest and talking to each other and starting the dialogue that we need to have, getting the information is who on earth would want to be involved in the creation of what saves the world. That's something really, really big. But instead of being all fear tactic about it and like keeping people like afraid and in their houses because you're afraid that they can't handle the reality, how about us, let's just start going through the variables that each of us bring to the table and the what ifs, and answering the what ifs in a way that somehow brings other people in. And if they want to be part of it, then they at least become awakened to the fact that they need to be prepared for XYZ. Okay. So once we've done that, now we have the foundation, we've built the walls, we have the ceiling. How do we assign the vetting program? Who's invited to this? Well, let's begin by first opening it up. We haven't even gotten to a point yet where people have started to show the interest. A lot of people are waiting till the very last minute to share with me that they're interested in this. That's fine. But we're at the point now where we're in the 7 years. So if we delay this too long, then we all know what's going to happen. We're not going to help as many people as we could have, and we're all going to carry that weight. Well, not all of us, because I've been working on this for a minute, but most of us have the opportunity now to literally step up and go, okay, he was right, even down to the earthquake. Let's just give this a shot. Let's explore what's happening, and we don't have to agree on the outcome, but we need to at least discuss what we need to do to get as many people as we can to safety. Only those that are willing to listen, and that's enough. That is the divine guidance that I've been given and that a lot of you have been given. Because if they don't want to listen, you can't herd sheep that are going in the wrong, like we don't want to herd anybody. We want them to be heard, and through our voice we want to guide them wherever they need to be. But we can't herd the sheep. That hasn't worked, right? That's why all this is falling apart. And so we now have to be above and beyond that and think globally and think about, okay, if this happens, how do we better address the fears of the people that are going to be realistic, right? In an earthquake setting, if it's a really big earthquake, does it set off a chain reaction? If it sets off a chain reaction, because it seems to be like really big, like these things aren't small, guys. Like the P word is, not going away, they say. It's just, it keeps perpetuating itself because the earth is cleansing. And so then on top of it, now we have earthquakes, which I still say is a pre-shock, FYI. And then there's something about Central America that I dreamt about. And so all of these things, instead of scoffing at them, realize that of all of us, guess who's been right? And instead of being egotistical about it, why am I right? Shouldn't that be of interest to other people? Shouldn't that be of interest to you to understand, well, I'm not like witchy. I'm not like I'm a Christian. Like I believe in Christ. So why am I able to listen to things that may not be very, very audible to other people, and exploring what that might mean, since I have the trajectory to look back on and go, God, he's been right. Why is that a variable? Why aren't we all listening to our intuition? How do we deal with those fears to overcome that? How do we address the needs of the people and build a foundation that allows people to find their way out? I cannot stress this enough, turquoise leadership. This is go time. This is not like we've had a year and a half to prepare. Everybody was supposed to be centered. Everybody was supposed to find their faith. We're supposed to find a higher calling, spend the time looking inwards, working through their shadows, facing their fears, so that when this stuff all comes down, they're able to think clearly and operate from that point. But we haven't done that because a lot of things have been done in shadow and have been done quietly. And though we understand why, what I'm saying to you now is that it's very clear that the turquoise leadership now has to step into a transparent role that explores all avenues of destruction and creation and find a bridge that connects as many people to possibilities. This is about us not saving people, having a way for them to save themselves. What they learn from what we discuss will be maybe the saving grace for wherever they are. I live in California, so I'm more prone to earthquakes. But we know that there's going to be another huge Katrina or another huge Sandy on the way this summer. So, you see what I'm saying? So we can actually address all of the concerns. This is the great dismantling. This is part of the tribulation. This is part of what happens when the race needs to educate itself and to find a better way. And if they don't want to do it, I said this in a LinkedIn article over a year and a half ago. I posted a LinkedIn article about Carmageddon, and I said, one of the things that the universe has come to realize is that if you want a bunch of brothers and sisters to find a cohesive path, then introduce something that truly puts them in jeopardy in order to get them all to work as one. So instead of waiting to the last minute, what I'm saying to you all at the Turquoise Leadership, it's time to start, putting this together. So let's begin from the basics. With the Turquoise Leadership, we know that something's going on under the surface of the earth. There's like some shifts going on and whatnot. We have the earthquakes and we have the volcanoes, we have tsunamis, we have superstorms. All of that is shifting. Is it possible that the poles are shifting? Is it possible that we are facing some sort of internal part with the magma that's changing consistency, the oceans with the water going down? All of the things that we weren't willing to look at before, we now have to kind of scurry around and kind of go, okay, well, let's look at the information and then find the people who speak to that and give very candid conversation. Be willing to hear a negative answer. Be willing to hear somebody say, we're probably going to. And be willing to hear it, because if you can't hear it, then you can't prepare for it. But an honest person that's stable, like me or you, that hears that, well, okay, I don't believe in the impossible. The divine wouldn't be handing us the opportunity to band together and make it through this if it was impossible. So, okay, tell me why it's impossible and let the rest of us work on it. And then suddenly you start having 3 people working on one thing. And then you have 4 people that come into it. And then you have 5 people. And suddenly you have all of these different eyes, which I call the delegation, which are now working on the impossible to make it probable. We do this all the time. We just don't think that we do it. And so at the Turquoise Leadership, that's who we're trying to pull in. So beginning at the beginning, we need somebody who is going to be willing to work with me on this and to look at all of the craziness. People who are kind of out there are the ones that you're probably going to need to talk to the most, because we're the ones that have the answers, and for some reason we have been gifted with knowledge that is not known by most people. Okay, so then we know that the divine is literally handpicking individuals that they want and feel worthy of whatever this is. Because the thing is, when you get rid of ego and when you get rid of all of the narcissistic quality and being attached to people that aren't, that are lower vibrational and stuff like that, you hear yourself clearly. And when you clean that vessel, you have information that other people don't have. How do I know? Because the proof has been in the pudding. I've been right. So how is that possible? Because that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to make this as very gentle as I can, because it's not like I did anything different than anybody else. It's just that I let go of I let go of the fear, I let go of the judgment, I let go of trying to be right all the time. I'm willing to be wrong, but in being wrong, at least I'm willing to explore all the topics that will probably save someone very, very quickly. And so we need to start bringing these people together, which probably means we very clearly need an investment of some kind. We need to get this somehow in a public forum. I really have a really, really big calling to get this somehow on a channel or something, and just have it begin as an informal conversation amongst brains, the most brilliant of minds who come together not out of ego, not out of a need to self-publicize, but in order to truly explore what's happening around us and be willing to hear the negative, so that we can actually bring light to that darkness. And so then we would need investment and we would need all of that stuff. But lucky for us, there is a pool of us called Turquoise Leadership that know of each other, and we are all many of you are at a point right now where you know what I'm saying is true. Are you willing to do something about it? Are we willing to let everything go to hell in a handbag? Because we were waiting for the perfect opportunity, which will never come for all of this to form. Or are we now willing to listen to the divine, who was very clear with me? I said this a while ago. Come Easter Sunday, it's go time. It's the 7 years begin. And so we had neglected that part. That's fine, I seem a little kooky. But now that it's again reconfirmed, like it has been in the history of me putting myself out there into ridicule and stuff like that, I've been right. So because that's going on, then why not actually explore the fact that we have an opportunity? I wouldn't be here saying this stuff if I didn't know for a fact that we're going to be fine. But we need to start working together as a team. So how do we pull you guys into this conversation and help you realize that it's time now to stop thinking of just yourself and to start putting yourself out there to help others? This is the only way that the collective is going to make it through this particular tribulation period. This is a test for all of humanity, to rise above the pettiness, to rise above the ego, to rise above the complacency, to rise above the fear, to rise above the hypocrisy, to rise above all of the fear tactics and all of the mongering that's gone on, and the elitism, sexism, homophobia. Get rid of all of that, because everyone now has to go through these gates. How do we make that a transition that is best for as many people as possible? Notice that with the P word, that they've been very clear in making us making it very subtly known that people with secondary health conditions and people with other conditions are going to have a harder time with what's going on. That's not accidental. So how do we make it as comfortable as we can for them? And how do we make it as comfortable for us that don't have those? You see what I'm saying? And so it's an uncomfortable conversation, but at this point, you all know I'm right. And instead of being like, I'm not going to be mean about it, that everybody waited longer than we probably should have. Everybody was waiting for the perfect opportunity. It's just not going to happen. It's not. And now that we're in the 7 years, I don't want us to all regret the opportunity to actually have done something when it began. And so I'm calling the turquoise leadership even more importantly to the table now. This is going to be make or break for society. We are being judged as a peer group. We have chosen the wrong paths in many directions. We allowed child trafficking. We allowed slavery. We allowed homophobia. We allowed sexism. We allowed genocides of entire races, subjugation of entire races, all of this stuff about slavery. We have just gone the wrong path. And then we decided to start playing with bioterrorism and nuclear weaponry. And we've tested it on our own soil, and then now we've released it into the world with this P word that we created. None of this is smart. All of it is the complete opposite of what we're supposed to do. And so we're now being judged as a peer group to fix it. So for those of you who hear me and see me and can look back on my history and even the books that I've written that was warning about all of this for the past 3 years, instead of worrying about the fact that I knew, why not focus on why you didn't know? What is it that we are not paying attention to? Because I'm not some super... I'm okay. I have good hair. But I'm not any different than you all are. I'm just more receptive to information. So instead of worrying about it being fake and shit and judging it, remember who's got the track record. I'm not different than you. This is all trainable information. This is all something we can share. All of us have skill sets that are unique to us that other people will have the ability to tap into. It's called the collective consciousness. It is the test. So if we can band together and start working and laying all of this good foundational groundwork, then all of the people that are ready to jump are going to make it. And instead of us later down the road going, we should have jumped into this further, all of us will have a legacy where we stepped in right away and said, hey, we did the best we could. And imagine the wonderful ability we'll have to breathe once we make it to where, after the 7 years, wherever this is going, that we know we did the best we could do. And that's where I'm going to leave it, guys. I'm not going to make a very long video today. It has begun. Now what do we, the turquoise leadership, do about it? How do we honor the fact that our governments are put in a rock and a hard place situation? How do we deal with the fact that a lot of people may question their faith now because of the secrets and all of the stuff? We have to start thinking bigger. We have to take a higher perspective. And right now that begins with me. I'm calling all of you to really look at the situation and make your decisions. I don't know what else to tell you guys. I know that I'm very, very proud of the fact that we've made it this far, but we know something's up. So let's explore how we help as many people as we can. That's all I wanted to say. That's it for me on Altruistic Channels. I hope you guys have a blessed day. You can always reach me at 818-984-5339 or at camus@msn.com. You guys have a blessed day and enjoy every day you have.